For our opening words today, I would like to recite an excerpt from Martin Luther King Jr.'s favorite speech, I Have a Dream. Dr. King gave this speech in 1963 during the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, which sought to rally for the civil and economic rights of African Americans in the nation's capital. His vision for the future of America was heard by 250,000 people. I have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slaveholders, will be able to sit down together at a table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream. I have a dream that one day Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right here, right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join the hands with little white boys and little white girls as sisters and brothers.
Good morning, my faith family. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak before you today. We gather here to celebrate a man who devoted his life to improving the lives of his fellow Americans. During a tumultuous period in history marked by hatred, violence, and discrimination, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. demonstrated that nonviolent resistance is the best way to fight against an oppressive society and bring peace to the world. Even in his darkest moments in the jail cell, he wrote about loving your enemies because hating them, however tempting it may be, adds, and I quote, deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Hatred incites a never-ending cycle of hatred, and those with hatred in their hearts can never build a peaceful and safe world. These individuals are only capable of violence and chaos. I believe that MLK Jr.'s philosophy of nonviolence still holds true today. In fact, we need it now more than ever as we continue to fight against an increasingly hostile and vicious government which oppresses and kills innocents not just within our own shores, but also beyond them. It does not matter which side of the aisle you're on, Democrat, Republican, Independent, we are all in danger. And I dream that one day that we will come to realize this, set aside our differences, and stand together in this fight for freedom. Many of us know MLK Jr.'s historic legacy, but I believe it is wise for us to look back to the past as we journey into the future. How did he use nonviolent resistance to advance the civil rights movement? And how can we use this philosophy of nonviolence today as we continue to fight for our own freedoms? Born in 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia, King was heavily influenced by his father, who was fondly known as Daddy King, and was the senior pastor of Atlanta's Ebenezer Baptist Church. MLK Jr. watched his father stand up to segregation every day in his life, even leading a march of several hundred African Americans to Atlanta City Hall to protest voting rights discrimination. King ultimately decided to follow in his father's footsteps, carrying forward the torch of truth and justice. Today, I will focus on 3 key examples of nonviolent demonstrations that were essential to advancing the civil rights movement. One of the most crucial moments that helped to establish MLK Jr. as a national leader in the civil rights movement and an advocate of nonviolent demonstration was the Montgomery bus boycotts in 1955. Sparked by Rosa Parks' bravery, King and the Montgomery Improvement Association, MIA for short, led a mass protest against the Montgomery transit system, encouraging Black residents to either carpool or walk. Over 200 people volunteered their cars for a carpool, and roughly 100 pickup stations operate within the city. Those who walked sometimes would walk 8 miles a day. The MIA's boycott resulted in the city's transit system losing between 30,000 and 40,000 bus fares every day. And mind you, this boycott lasted for 381 days. Despite harassment from local law enforcement, this protest proved successful when, on November 13, 1956, the Supreme Court ruled that Alabama's bus segregation rules were unconstitutional. Riding on the success of the Montgomery boycotts in 1957, MLK Jr. founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC for short, to mount nonviolent protests against Jim Crow laws. Inspired by Gandhi's model of nonviolent resistance, King believed that peaceful protests for civil rights would garner more sympathetic media coverage and opinion from the larger public. These beliefs would be put to the test in 1963. In April 1963, King and the SCLC mounted a massive, nonviolent, direct action campaign against Birmingham, Alabama's segregation system. At the time, Birmingham was considered to be the most segregated city in America. This city also had an extraordinary record for violence against African Americans, with church bombings and arson rampant within its borders. Black citizens even dubbed the city Bombingham. Because of the city's reputation, MLK Jr. and other civil rights activists knew that the city's current media coverage would draw attention to their cause. They believed that if they could get enough sympathetic support for the civil rights movement to push for desegregation in Birmingham, they would be able to achieve this goal anywhere in the country. On April 12, MLK Jr. was arrested while marching with protesters and sent to solitary confinement. It was at this time that he penned his famous letter from Birmingham jail in response to a statement published in that Pacific newspaper that he was writing on about 8 Birmingham clergymen who condemned the protests. When it seemed as though the Birmingham campaign wouldn't have enough supporters to keep moving on, hope would be found in the city's younger generations. In early May, more than 1,000 African American students joined the marches. Appalled by the mass number of protesters, Commissioner Eugene Bull Connor, one of the city's biggest advocates for segregation in the city, ordered local police and fire departments to use force to halt these demonstrations. Over the next several days, news footage and images of children being blasted with fire hoses, clubbed by police officers, and attacked by police dogs appeared on television and in newspapers, sparking outrage across the nation. Marches and protests continued over the next several days, and public pressure on Birmingham officials continued to mount until they reluctantly agreed to negotiate with the SCLC. On May 10th, the two parties settled on a plan for gradual desegregation in public spaces, the release of jailed protesters, and the formation of a biracial committee to monitor the implementation of this agreement. This step towards desegregation was the justification that the SCLC needed. Nonviolent resistance earned the civil rights movement important ground in one of the most segregated cities in America and spurred a flurry of subsequent protests across the South. The Birmingham campaign, as well as King's powerful I Have a Dream speech in Washington, D.C., moved President John F. Kennedy so much that he proposed a comprehensive civil rights legislation in June 1963. His successor, President Lyndon B. Johnson, finally signed this bill into law 7 months after Kennedy's assassination. Known as the Civil Rights Act of 1964, this law prohibited racial discrimination and segregation in public spaces, public education, and federally assisted programs. This landmark civil rights legislation will be one of 2 key legislations that the SCLC's nonviolent demonstrations would help to pass during MLK Jr.'s lifetime. The second, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, will be passed just 1 year later. On January 2nd, 1965, King and the SCLC joined other local African American activists in the voting rights campaign in Selma, where only 2% of Black citizens were registered to vote. The SCLC knew that vicious brutality of local law enforcement under the direction of Sheriff Jim Clark would attract national attention and pressure President Lyndon B. Johnson and Congress to enact new national voting rights legislation. During this campaign, civil rights activists faced both arrests and violence at the hands of law enforcement, including the infamous Bloody Sunday. On that day, March 7, 1965, local law enforcement officers and state troopers attacked protesters with clubs and tear gas. The troopers continued to beat protesters even as they ran away. Footage of this heinous incident sparked outrage nationwide. On March 15th, President Johnson announced that his support for the protesters and federally sanctioned the march from Selma to Montgomery, prohibiting local police from harassing the demonstrators. This federally sanctioned march, led by MLK Jr. and protected by Alabama National Guardsmen and FBI agents, left Selma on March 21st. 25,000 people ultimately joined this march, making the 54-mile journey in 4 days. During the final rally, held on the steps on the Capitol in Montgomery, King proclaimed, "The end we seek is a society at peace with itself, a society that can live with its conscience. And that will be the day, not of the white man, not of the Black man. That will be the day of man as man." These marches have profoundly influenced President Johnson and Congress. On August 6, in the presence of King and other civil rights leaders, President Johnson signed into law the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which outlawed discriminatory voting practices such as literacy tests and poll taxes, paving the way for the enforcement of the 15th Amendment without the intervention from federal, state, or local governments. It has been nearly 60 years since Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. Since his death, the mission to make his dream a reality has been passed down from generation to generation. Nearly 60 years later, we still strive to keep his memory alive. As we celebrate and honor MLK Jr. and his monumental footprint in history, we must keep in mind that it is not enough to simply remember him. Yes, we no longer have segregated buses, schools, or public spaces. Yes, every American, regardless of their skin color, can technically now legally vote. But we still have a long road ahead of us. Their rights are actively being stripped away from us, and hatred, injustice, and violence are growing in our society like a cancerous tumor. We are losing our ability to control our bodies, to love freely, to vote, and to speak our truth. Millions of our fellow Americans struggle to put food on the table, suffocating under the weight of inflation and debt. Companies irresponsibly use technology, cutting people from their jobs, making that financial weight even more unbearable. Agents in black, claiming to be our protectors, kidnap our neighbors from their homes and off the streets, and even take their lives. In this moment in our history, we are sad, we are angry, and we are scared. And we are right to feel that way. But we cannot let these emotions fester into hate. Instead, on this coming MLK Jr. Day and every day after, turn those emotions, that sadness, that fear, that anger, into determination to carry forward the torch of truth and justice. Find a way to make King's dream a reality, no matter how large or small it may seem. Participate in a protest. Write a letter to your representatives. Boycott toxic organizations. Practice your civil liberty and go out and vote. Support someone who is hurting in this time of need. Go out and serve your community. Let your voice be heard, and most importantly, do not give up. The nonviolent road to freedom and peace is long and hard. MLK Jr. and his fellow activists experienced that day after day. But regardless of the challenges, the harassment, the violence, the losses, they never gave up. It has been nearly 60 years since Martin Luther King Jr.'s passing, but his dream is still alive in my heart, as I am sure it is alive in yours. You do not have to be a Martin Luther King Jr. to make a positive change in this world. Instead, we can be like one of the 250,000 people who rallied for him in Washington, D.C., or the 25,000 who marched those 4 days from Selma to Montgomery. Let us strive to fulfill his dream of justice, brotherhood, and peace, and honor his legacy. Thank you all, my faith family.
For our closing words today, I would like to read another passage from another one of Dr. King's works, Strength to Love. Strength to Love is a volume of its most well-known homilies we ultimately published in 1963. He began composing these sermons during a fortnight in jail in July of 1962. He wrote sermons such as Loving Your Enemies, Love in Action, and Shattered Dreams. In his little jail cell, which King described as dirty, filthy, and ill-equipped, and the worst I have ever seen, even in one of his darkest moments when temptation to hate his enemies would be profound, he wrote about love and nonviolence in the face of adversity, knowing that they are only true ways to dismantle an oppressive society. From Dr. King. Returning hate for hate multiplies hate, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Hate multiplies hate, violence multiplies violence, and toughness multiplies toughness in a descending spiral of destruction. So when Jesus says, love your enemies, he is setting forth a profound and inescapable admonition.